Why did you come to Harlow?
I came to Harlow because I was involved in bingo in the early 60s. It was 1964 actually, and my business at the time was placing roulette tables on a concession basis into bingo clubs. I discovered a place called the Embers. It was the Embers Ballroom really at the Stowe, which ran a little bit of bingo, and approached the owner of that, a fellow called Nat Block, and our various discussions led to his saying to me, "Do you know anybody who would like to run the bingo here?" Because he was farming it out and wasn't very happy with the results. And to cut a long story short, I wound up first of all renting the hall from him on a nightly basis to run bingo sessions. First of them was the 28th of February 1964, and it was a Friday.
So for the purposes of 2017, purposes of the tape as they say,
yeah.
Whereabouts is the Embers, whereabouts exactly in the Stowe is that, or was that?
It's what's now the snooker club, above Dorrington's at, whichever end, the opposite end from the Essex Skipper, which oddly enough is now mine. But so I finished up taking the lease over from him of the building, and I eventually had 30 years there in its various guises. First of all as a bingo club, when bingo ran out of steam a bit, and then the Mecca opened up in the town centre, which was a bigger premises, and affected the business a bit. We switched over to disco for a while, which was called Benny's. That ran for about 4 years, but that was never really successful on the basis that the licensing was opposed by the local council, who oddly enough were the landlords but didn't want to rent. The lease stated the place was a dance hall, but in fact they didn't want me to play music there because it was making a noise. It was all very confused. But
didn't Benny's end up on a BBC documentary?
It didn't end up on one. It featured in one. Yes, that's another story. That's the background of that is that I was approached by somebody who wanted to put on a punk night, I suppose you'd call it, at that time, with skinheads and so on. And I didn't fancy taking the booking too much. And my chief doorman at the time said, "Well, look, it's winter time. There's not much business about. It's not doing much, and they're all the same lot, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem. We think we can handle it if you want to do it." So okay, we gave it a go. So we accepted the booking. This guy who wanted to promote this skinhead do, and a while later, I was approached by the BBC asking if they could film it. So that sounded like a good idea, a bit of publicity for the place. So I said yes to that. And the BBC then came back and said, "Oh, well, they got another bunch of people they wanted to bring down from London." And effectively, I didn't realise it at the time, so they did this. But of course, what it did was create two factions: the Harlow lot and the London lot. And I'm pretty sure the whole thing was set up and staged as a fight simply to make television material for the BBC. But of course it didn't do the place a lot of good, and that's basically what a lot of people remember about Benny's to this day.
So I do apologise for bringing you back to that dark period of 1982.
It wasn't the original.
Good times, enjoyable?
Oh, brilliant, yeah. And I mean, it was, they were good times, they were highly enjoyable times, and I think it was highly successful. I mean, as the jackpot used to build on this bingo thing, we get nights where they were queuing around the corners of the library to get in the place, and the whole place used to be full of. I think it was, I earned well out of it, I make no secret of that, but it also provided, I think, a good leisure facility for the people of Harlow. They enjoyed it, and I think the ones who are still around to remember it with some affection.
Did you have the people doing multiple cards and things
like
that?
Yes.
And you mustn't interfere and interrupt.
I mustn't interfere. The thing about multiple cards is that with bingo's played on a complete set of 90 numbers. And if there are 15 numbers on a single ticket, if you have a strip of 6 tickets, you get each of the numbers once appearing somewhere on that strip. So people wanting 6 tickets wanted 6 in a row, not 2 lots of 3 or a 4 and a 2. Because then once they ticked the number off, that was it, they could go on to the next one. And it was as simple as that, really. That's how they did it. Running 6, some people could run 12 tickets on the same basis. Easy enough to mark off the numbers. I think the problem was keeping an eye on whether you've won something or have got a claim, and to get the call in before the next number is called out, because then you lose.
So how long were you running Embers for?
The Embers as a bingo club, going on for 20 years. No, it was a bit less. It was 1965 we started, and it finished, I think, round about the end of 79, beginning of 80, somewhere around there. Yeah, so it's about 16 years, the bingo. Then there was 4 years of Benny's, the nightclub, before that finally went under. And then the snooker club, which I turned it into a snooker club in 1984, I think it was, and that was highly successful for a number of years. But again, like many things, or most things actually, in the leisure business, they are cyclical. They run for a while, they have their peak, and then they fade away for no apparent reason. People just tend to do something else. People still do it, people still play snooker today, but there's not the number. So you don't have the number of snooker clubs still operating that you used to. The few that are about are still doing it, but I think the snooker was really launched on the back of the television coverage, which was enormous in the late 70s, early 80s, I suppose. And I think it gradually faded away. I think the background of it was possibly that the professionals got a bit too demanding of the promoters of the television companies, and were asking for more and more prize money. The TV companies, I think, eventually said, hold on, we don't particularly need you, you need us. The coverage dropped, and the popularity of snooker dropped. It has a level now, as does bingo. People will say, oh, bingo is still tremendously popular, because there's one club in the town and it does very well. But the problem is the next one's probably about 15, 20 miles away. Whereas back in the 60s you had bingo clubs on almost every corner. Everyone was playing it, but had its go.
This is slightly at a tangent, but you see on TV now all this online betting and gambling in between half-time at football games. You can bet this, can bet that. Do you think that's do you worry about that, or do you think that's just changing nature of it?
I mean, by the same token, we were allowed in the bingo days when I was involved 2 fruit machines. It started off with the old sixpence play, which is 2.5p in today's money, and admittedly there's been inflation since. So I think if you have a machine where you can put 50 pence or a pound in, that's not too bad. When you can bet 100 or 1,000 pounds or whatever it is on one spin or one turn of the machine, I think that's extremely dangerous. And we also had the situation where we were limited to 2 machines in the bingo clubs, and of course there were several hundred people wanting to play the machine. Well, not all of them wanted to play the machine, but of that several hundred, quite a lot wanted, and we used to allow them sort of 3 goes or 5 goes at a time. Then they go to the back of the queue and go forward again, and even the queue was a little social factor. They were standing there talking about this and that. And of course it limited the amount of money that you could actually lose. Bingo itself, that was limited by the fact that you had to play the card. You could only mark so many cards, so you had difficulty losing your week's wager. Not that I want anybody to lose their week's wages. I mean, the benefit to the promoter of all these games is to have people play for what they can afford and come back another time. You don't want people in the bankruptcy court or starving their family because they've lost all their money at whatever you're running. You wouldn't want it from a humanitarian point of view, and it's not clever from a business point of view either.
Going on from that, I think you might mention, did you go on to run pubs?
Yes, I did. Yes, most recently. In fact, I still have the Essex Skipper, which, strangely enough, is the other end of the stove from where I started off at the Embers. But I mean, lots of things in between. But I don't actually run the Skipper nowadays. I sort of rent it out to the my former manageress, and she seems to be doing okay there.
Excellent.
All is well. But I mean, in between time, with going back to the bingo days, I had a whole chain of bingo clubs running in various other places at one time. I mean, the Embers was where I started off, and that was probably always, if not the best, one of the better ones. But I was spread about quite a bit. We were in Dunmow, West Mersey, Burnham-on-Crouch, Windsor, Romsey in Hampshire. You know, I did quite a bit of travelling in those days. My car mileage was horrendous.
Do you enjoy it? Looking back on what you've been doing, do you enjoy it?
Indeed.
What do you enjoy about it?
I think the activity, the mental challenge, if you like, mixing with various types of people and so on. You know, that's it's quite an experience. Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, Harlow gets a certain amount of negative publicity, but I think, as a friend of mine says frequently, there are a lot worse places to live than Harlow. I mean, it has a lot going for it. It's nice green spaces. It's very convenient for wherever you want to get in the country. You're close to the motorway connection. You've got the overground rail into London. You've got the central line running from Epping. It's a pretty convenient place to get around and about, and I think the only thing I would say is not of A1 class about it. It's probably the architecture, but then it was built for a purpose. It was an overspill for really post-war Londoners and other big cities. You know, it is to provide housing that wasn't there.
And you see, there's big companies moving in. We just mentioned Public Health England are coming. There's new enterprise zone up where Church Langley is, and so it's almost a time of change, isn't it? Would you have any advice to the people who are responsible for Harlow, in a way to keep it, maintain it, or grow?
I'm not the one to give advice on such matters. That's I don't think that's for me at all. It's not my department.
Okay. Going back on something regarding the clubs, etc. Did you ever have tangles with licensing departments and councils, and was that quite frustrating?
Well, particularly in the days of Benny's, the nightclub, because I spent a lot of money on that and made it. It was a very attractive and desirable thing. In fact, oddly enough, a lot of people I've met since through the pub businesses always refer back to Benny's, and Benny's was only 4 years. It was probably the shortest and certainly the least financially successful of my ventures there, shall we say. But I think the problem was Harlow Council set itself against the licensing extension. I mean, they were happy to grant a 2 o'clock licence to Tiffany's, I think it was then, in the town centre. It's had various names. They would only give me midnight, and it was on the basis it was going to cause nuisance and sound noise and this and that, and we took various steps to preclude that, including installing soundproofing within the building. You could stand outside the building and not hear a thing. I think the problem, if there was a problem, was probably noise transmitted through the structure, because there were common structural beams running through that club and the alongside masonettes, so there was probably some carriage of sound through that method. It could probably have been sold, but it would have been mildly expensive. But the thing that I most resent about that period was that I applied for the late licence, and they all said it's going to do this, going to do that. I said, look, give it for a short period. I think the final application I made was fairly late in the year, maybe about September time, and the thing was due to be renewed the following February. So I said, you're granting it for a few months, it will come up for review then. If your fears are founded, then I haven't got a case, right? So you can take away any licence you grant, but I think we should at least be given a chance. And on this final meeting, what was absolutely galling for me was there were 6 councillors. There were three men and 3 women. The chairman or chairperson of it was a lady called Renee Morris, and the normal situation with these with that kind of committee is the chairman doesn't vote or chairperson doesn't vote. Now they each spoke. They listened to my arguments Each spoke. The three men voted to give it a chance and give us a run at the labour licence. The two ladies spoke against it, and then the chairman spoke against it. So they took the vote, and I thought, well, it doesn't matter what she thinks. The vote is going to be in my favour, and it was. They took the vote, and it came like that: 3-4, 2 against. But then Renee Morris stuck her hand up and said, "Well, I'm against it, so I vote against. We now have equality, so I'll take a casting vote as a chairman, and I vote against it, so therefore it's ruled out." So she alone turned the whole thing round from being a pro vote to an anti vote, and I feel that was totally out of order. A chairman's vote. A chairman's supposed to be neutral in committees, and if they have a casting vote, it's because the other members of that committee have reached an equality situation. It only reached equality because she stuck her oar in and voted, and she finished up voting twice, which I think was wrong. Anyway, it's long in the past now, and she's no longer with us. So that's history. There's nothing I can do about that.
Indeed. So in concluding, as you mentioned, that's history. You're, as I said, this is part. My 44th interview as this part of why people came to Harlow. You're pleased to come to Harlow.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah. No, Harlow's been pretty good to me overall.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
David Sampson.
I have no complaints at all.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.